this particular series, this first webinar series, kicks us off. It's about hope, and hope lives here as we build the village together. But before we talk about what exactly, that looks like, maybe you'd like to hear a little bit about this theme and where the theme comes from. And to do that, we've brought with us a special guest speaker from the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, Hillary Conrad, who is the Bureau Chief within the Office of Child Abuse Prevention of the California Department of Social Services. Hillary, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone, for being here to share your morning with us and to kick off the Child Abuse Prevention Month webinar series. As Jess mentioned, I'm Hillary Conrad, the Bureau Chief of the Office of Child Abuse Prevention within the Department of Social Services here in California. For those of you who don't know me, I've been serving children and families for over 15 years here in California, Missouri, North Carolina, and briefly in Texas. Prior to joining the state, I provided direct services as a child protective services worker in Missouri and also worked at nonprofits and private entities in the human services field. I've also volunteered at court-appointed special advocates and Big Sisters through Big Brothers and Big Sisters, coordinated volunteer activities, and was part of leadership at a women's organization focused on making an impact in the community. It is a privilege for me to be here today as we come together to observe Child Abuse Prevention Month. This is a time for us to reflect on the essential work that each one of us does to protect and support children across our state, and to reaffirm our shared commitment to ensuring that all children grow up in safe, nurturing environments. California, with its vast diversity and wide-ranging communities, faces unique challenges in our fight to prevent child abuse. Yet it is through collaboration, awareness, and education that we can address these challenges head-on. Together, we can all make a difference. This month is an important time to reflect on the progress we've made, recognize the challenges that still lie ahead, and renew our commitment to protecting children and supporting families. As professionals in various fields, whether you work in social services, at a CAPC or family resource center, education, healthcare, law enforcement, or the many other roles critical to child safety and well-being, your expertise, dedication, and compassion are vital in preventing abuse and neglect. Preventing child abuse isn't just about responding to incidents. It's about creating a culture of awareness, education, and support where children and families feel safe and understood. It's about coming together as a community to ensure that every child can grow up in an environment free from fear, harm, and neglect. When we say it takes a village in the context of professionals being the village to strengthen families, we are acknowledging that the work of supporting and protecting children and families is not something that any one professional or agency can do alone. It requires a coordinated effort with each professional contributing their expertise and support to create a network that surrounds families with the resources, care, and protection they need to thrive. Here's what it takes a village looks like and what you will learn or be reminded of throughout the Child Abuse Prevention Month webinar series. Collaboration across disciplines, building trust and relationships, prevention through education and support, community involvement and advocacy, strengthening protective factors and improving the social determinants of health. In short, professionals act as the village by working together, sharing resources, and creating a network of supports that surrounds families with the help they need. Strengthening families is not a solo endeavor. It requires the collaboration of a community of dedicated professionals who bring their skills, compassion, and expertise to bear in helping families build a safe and healthy future. By working as a unified village, we can prevent child abuse and ensure that every child has a chance to grow up in a living, supportive environment. With this webinar series, which will be held each Wednesday in April, as Jess mentioned, and is a collaborative effort of our own village of training and technical assistant partners, the California Training Institute, the Child Abuse Prevention Center, and Safe and Sound, and of course, all the professionals you will hear from who are passionate to share their work and perspectives about how we can continue to build and support the village for children, parents, caregivers, and families. You will hear from local level examples of shared responsibility and systems change work, from the experiences of youth from a tribal perspective, the importance of trust and healing, the mandated reporting to community supporting work, and finally, a panel of professionals in the field who also have lived expertise. Once again, thank you for being here and your dedication to this cause. Your work makes a difference every single day. And together we are building a safer, stronger California for all of our children. Let's keep this momentum going and continue to collaborate for the betterment of every child in our state and promote the message, it takes a village, during Child Abuse Prevention Month. Thank you, and I will pass it back to Jess.
Thank you, Hillary. And remember, the way that we clap at the end of our speakers is with our reactions on the bottom of your screen. So what I will say, Hillary just mentioned something that's important. And if we look at this series title slide here, you'll see that there's a few logos at the bottom. And Hillary just mentioned them as partners, TA partners that are here to support you and support the work that you do. We are humans who serve humans who serve humans. And so what we'd like to do is just take a moment to just introduce what those resources look like, and very specifically, what do they do for you? And so we have just a little bit of information. If you would like more, which I hope you do, I will remind you that in your action sheet on the third page, you'll find these logos. And if you click on them, it'll take you to their website. So why don't we, if you don't mind, Hillary, would you just kick us off and give us a little bit of what OCAP does for the people on the call?
Yes, thank you, Jess. So OCAP, which is within the Children and Family Services Division in the Department of Social Services, we provide grants and contracts to community-based organizations and other partners that are focused on family strengthening efforts. In addition to that, we also fund training and technical assistance for county child welfare and then other cross-sector departments, specifically lifting up the voices of child abuse prevention councils and family resource centers. And we provide technical assistance to county child welfare on their prevention program, as well as oversee their prevention funding. And I will go ahead and pass it back to you, Jess.
Great. Just a question, if anyone on the line is a grantee of OCAP, like Caltrin is, would you tell us in the chat? Say me if that's you, and maybe tell us what the grant is. Awesome. Now I'd like to introduce the CAP Center. Michael.
Thank you. I don't have to put this in chat because some of our work is funded by OCAP. Hi, I'm Michael Williams. I'm the Policy Director at the Child Abuse Prevention Center here in Sacramento. We are the California chapter of Prevent Child Abuse America. And through that connection that we collaborate with OCAP and have been collaborating with OCAP for a number of years on Child Abuse Prevention Month and are proud to do that. We offer a number of statewide supports. Our strategies technical assistance is funded by the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, and we do some of the work on the ground around supporting the FRCs and FRC networks and CAPCs, as well as support to local networks and collaborations doing prevention work together, and family resource centers and FRC networks wanting to build their capacity to really be the community pathway for all of the prevention work we're talking about. And I don't know if I mentioned Strategies TA, we offer it in collaboration with All for Kids in Southern California. CFRA is the California Family Resource Association. It's the membership network of family resource centers, family strengthening networks, and family strengthening organizations in the state. And I will put these links in the chat as well. Actually, I'll do it right now because they're ready to go. Oh, except it did that. We also place AmeriCorps volunteers in organizations around the state. I won't go into detail on that, but do reach out if you're interested. An AmeriCorps volunteer is a career path for folks in the community, as well as an exciting way to serve the community. And a lot of my work, largely through CFRA, but also for overall child abuse prevention, we do policy advocacy at the Capitol. As a lot of folks on this webinar also do, we have some local innovations. We actually are very involved as the Child Abuse Prevention Council with the wonderful panelists you're going to hear from shortly, as well as things like the Birth and Beyond Family Resource Network, Black Infant Health Program, Child Death Review Team, and Safe Sleep Baby. And I won't go into details on those, but we're always interested to share our learning and to learn from others who are doing the same work. So we're excited to share all that.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Also, we have another partner on the line who will actually be leading one of the sessions in just a few weeks, which is our Lunch and Learn, and that would be Safe and Sound. If we could have just a little information about Safe and Sound and what they do for the folks on the call.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here. I want to start by thanking our partners and hosts, The Village, that made this webinar and these series happen, Office of Child Abuse Prevention, CAP Center, and California Training Institute. My name is Peg Offwad, and I'm CEO of Safe and Sound, which is a community-based organization in San Francisco that for over 50 years has been dedicated to working with families and communities to prevent child abuse and neglect. And Safe and Sound provides direct services to impacted families. We partner with dozens of organizations to help build a larger community that keeps kids safe and families strong. And we also conduct research and advocacy across California to develop policies and practices to help make our state a place where children and families can really thrive. I think something that's core to the work that we do at Safe and Sound is that we believe deeply in the power of prevention and upstream investment, both as a matter of delivering effective services, but also as good public policy. And in a few days, we're excited to release our annual Economics of Child Abuse report, which really shows how costly it is to focus on reactive interventions after a family crisis instead of preventive services and supports. It's costly to both the children who experience that abuse and neglect and to society at large. So I hope you all will check that report out. And that's not all that we're doing for Child Abuse Prevention Month. We're also, as Jessica mentioned, we're honored to be part of this partnership to offer an amazing set of webinars to learn and share ideas about building a village where children and families can thrive. And so the webinar that I'm moderating on April 16th at noon is about continuing this year's theme of It Takes a Village with a discussion among local and national leaders about building trust. And I believe we will have the link should be in the chat on how to register for that. As well as on the OCAP flyer that you all should have received. Another resource, the last resource I'll share is a link to our Child Abuse Prevention Month calendar that Safe and Sound produces with our partners from the Greater Bay Area Child Abuse Prevention Council Coalition. There are nearly 100 events happening all over the Bay Area, as well as virtual events for those outside of the Bay. So I hope you'll join us for at least one, if not more, of those events. And finally, I just, again, want to thank our partners who've made this happen, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And as Dr. Pega mentioned, there are links in the chat as well. So the last partner we want to introduce to you, or if you're not familiar already, is the California Training Institute, who I am representing today. Our friends call us Caltrin for short. And I always ask this question when I'm in a crowd. If you've ever attended a Caltrin training before, would you tell me? Would you tell me in the chat? Just say me if you have. And if you have not yet, thank you, April. I see you. Thank you, Michael. Wonderful. If you have not yet, then I challenge you to look at our calendar in the month of April and tell me there isn't one training in there that isn't perfect for you or your staff. So Caltrin, we are funded to provide free staff training and development. So that's typically, well, it's always virtual. We do webinars on tons of different topics that cover everything from evidence-based practices, trauma-informed organizations, direct service delivery, and leadership and management. So we invite you to join us. And of course, we bring it to you at the cost of $0. Thank you to the grant. And so with that, I'd like to move. Oh, I do have one quick announcement. We have the opportunity to provide and serve this conversation with the panelists in a different and exciting way. We have with us a Spanish interpreter that has joined the call. This Spanish interpreter will provide live time Spanish interpretation while our panel is discussing. So on the line, what you're looking, or on the slide, you're looking at instructions on how exactly to access that. In just a moment, a globe is going to appear at the bottom of your screen. If you select that globe and would like to hear this discussion happening in live time, but in Spanish language, you can select that option. You'll still be able to see the panelists, but the sound will be coming from our interpreter, Carmen, in Spanish. So we invite you to join us in the Spanish room if that is the right option for you today. You can do that now. You should see that globe appear for you. All right. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We are so grateful to have a collection of panelists with us. You can take a look at this screen here. And so I'd like to introduce you to Tangela Davis, LaDonna Lee, Norin Matthews, Karen Parker, Kim Pearson, Carol Ramirez, Sarah Sims, Gina Warren, and Marilyn Woods. Collectively, they have agreed to answer some questions that really are about this idea of hope lives here, building the village together. We have a series of questions that we're going to go through. You'll see the questions on the slide. And as a participant, if you're listening in the audience and you hear a panelist say something that you think to yourself, oh, I love that, you can give them a reaction, which is our way to applause. But also don't forget you have that action sheet. So if there's a takeaway that really kind of sparks something in you, write it down. Keep it so that you don't forget it moving forward. Okay, so let's move into the first question, shall we? The first question that we have, let me set the stage here. Authentic engagement requires humility and shared power. The question is, what does shared accountability look like in your day-to-day work, especially when things don't go as planned?
So I will take the first question. Thank you, Jessica. This is Kim Pearson. I want to just start out, first of all, by reflecting that the panel that's here today, we came together very quickly, and I think that sets the stage and illustrates how we work together in community to continue to nurture and build that hope here in Sacramento. And so in focusing on the question, I'd like to start and just be very candid around the word authentic. And I think that in a number of spaces, authentic has become somewhat of a talking point, and a true space for people to show up and be their authentic selves is really when you get to that space where there's not a meeting after the meeting about who showed up in the room as a collective whole. There's not a sidewalk conversation that takes place after the initial meeting comes together. I think it's really important when we talk about shared power that we really reflect on the fact that as an agency, and speaking in the child welfare world, there's a lot of power that comes with just the name and being in child welfare. And we as leaders, we're really responsible for really recognizing that, validating that, and then making space and room to really level set the room and the work within our communities. And that can be easier said than done. And so I want to just give like an example of what it looks like to really be able to do that work in a way where the authentic engagement brings forth that humility and those opportunities for shared power. The example I'm going to share is something that took place several years ago, more than 10 years ago, and it's really going to reflect on the fact of the growth that we've done within our agency when it comes to shared power. So we had a meeting with a number of community members, and again, being very candid, the focus was on how we showed up as child welfare within the community with our African American Black population. Setting the stage for your vision of what this meeting looked like, there were elected officials who were in the room because some of the community members, of course, were constituents of those elected officials. Then we had our leadership, and we had a number of our councils present. And so throughout the course of this dialogue, there was a young woman there who had done a lot of research as it related to our welfare and institution codes, as well as our policies and our procedures. And her interpretation of the welfare and institution code and the policies and procedures wasn't quite accurate. It didn't really align with what the spirit and intent of the welfare and institution codes and the policies reflected. And you could feel that in the room. Again, just kind of walking back and envisioning who's in the room. And it was very palatable with the system side of the house versus the community. It's very palatable. You could see it in the body language. You could see that what was being shared was not being received. And it became this conversation that really centered on who holds the power in the room. And there was a lot of back and forth in regards to if what this young woman was saying was accurate, and trying to move her away from what she was bringing into the room. We took a moment to pause, and this is where the shared power and the humility comes into play. Instead of trying to win in conversations and trying to win in the work that we do together, if we take a step back and just validate that this parent, this community member who wants to see the best for children in our community and her own child, that what she was bringing into the room was her truth. Like, that's what she believed, that's what she interpreted. And for us to not even acknowledge the fact that you did a lot of research, you brought forth a lot of information. And while it doesn't exactly align with what it is that we're interpreting, let's take some time together to go over what your interpretation is and what our interpretation is. And because the focus was on our policies and procedures, let's take that policy and procedure in question and walk that through together. And I will tell you, this again was years back. And so that wasn't immediately received from the systems side of the house, right? But then when we began to move that conversation into that opportunity to educate and to work together and to share that power, you could see the change come forth in the room, as well as from the other community members, that we were level setting the room and making space for people to show up authentically. It takes a tremendous amount of humility to be able to not want to, in that moment, dictate the direction of the conversation because of strong systems belief, and put that aside and allow for that authentic, true conversation to come into the room and to be able to work together. I'm happy to say that, again, that was many years ago. I think if we had that same scenario today, it wouldn't even be a question in regards to how we would work together in a space of shared power and educating our community, and most importantly, the community educating us as a system, as an agency.
Thank you so much. And I think a lot of the people on the line would agree that having examples like you've shared really help bring it home. I believe, LaDonna, you might have had a thought about that as well.
I did. I love listening to Kim speak. Can y'all hear me well?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the question asks, what does it look like in our day-to-day work? I'm a culture broker, family advocate. So what that means is day to day, I am standing shoulder to shoulder, sometimes back to back, with African-American Black families who are interfacing with CPS, helping them navigate this behemoth of a system. But That also means that I show up as a partner to the Department of Child Welfare. So culture brokers get to play this exceptional role of being a bridge, being the third point in the triangulation. And because we show up in partnership, I'm going to say we live for shared power and accountability. Um, I made a note of an example because I can get into storytelling and we only have so much time. Um, but what that can look like is getting a call from an emergency response social worker to do a joint response at the maternity ward. We've got a mom and baby who tested positive for substances at delivery. Culture broker shows up, social worker shows up. We have a brief sidewalk conversation about how it's going to go. I'm always tell the social worker, I follow your lead. We get in there, we're talking to this mom. Mom's in denial. Mom is denying use. So in terms of shared power, the social worker's role is to explain the purpose of child welfare and the structure of how that system goes in a scenario like this. And the purpose of the culture broker, specifically the way I show up as a soul sister. I am going to talk to that mother um, from the deepest level that I can reach. We are here to save your life, this baby's life, and we need some honesty. Everybody is going to share in the accountability, and everybody is going to move based on their strengths. So that's what it looks like for me.
Angela, I believe you had a thought as well.
Yeah, my name is Tangela Davis. I'm with Rapidly Housing. On our end, it's sort of the same, the best, well, my model, like the one I like to go by is, meet the client, meet the person where they are, don't talk at them, have a conversation with them, listen, everyone so used to want to tell everybody what they want or what they're looking for, but sometimes just listen to see what they're looking for and what some of their wants are. So that's what we try to focus on here is meeting the clients where they are and, trying to, let them take the lead sometimes. And if, maybe take their feelings into consideration versus just telling them what they want and needs.
Absolutely. And I believe, Marilyn, I thought you had something to add as well.
Yes, thank you for inviting us into this conversation. With us, we live in authenticity as we engage with our clients because we know authenticity builds trust. And when you're able to build trust, you're able to move the ball forward for everyone. We have healing circles where we provide safe spaces for our clients to come together and process their trauma. Our mission is to disrupt intergenerational trauma. We're celebrating today a father who had been formerly incarcerated all his life. He's celebrating 7 years freed free today. And that's even with his father, who he had not had much time with. His father was also freed out of prison for less than a year and was murdered. And this will be 2 years since his murder. So progress is not linear. We have ups and downs, but being in a space where our clients can share and process the challenges that they've experienced and providing the support that they need in order to continue to make progress is essentially if you're working in the community. We're trying to build a community that was ravished by a variety of circumstances. On our staff, as an example, we have over 70 years of incarceration. So we are our community, and we are applying the tools that we have to rebuild all the things that our clients and community have broken over the years. But trust is paramount because for most of our clients, trust is the one thing that they were failed at. Folks just not showing up. So consistency and building that trust provides an opportunity or a foundation for our clients to move forward.
You know, as I hear these panelists sharing their experience, I'm curious for the audience, for those of you that are listening in, I've identified a few takeaways for myself, some themes that I've kind of noticed, and I'm curious for those of you that are listening, why don't you start dropping them in the chat? As we kind of wrap up this question, is there anything that you heard that might be a reflection question for yourself or a takeaway? I'll tell you a few that stand out to me. I just want to highlight. It's the idea of meeting folks where they are. And so we've heard a couple panelists talking about taking the lead. And for example, in one case, it was taking the lead of a caseworker. In another, it might be taking the lead with the client. And it also sounds like consistency and trust is at the foundation of accountability. I really appreciate that statement as well that I heard. And in the chat, I see LaDonna comes in as a soul sister. Just beautiful. I agree. And I'm sure people would agree with that. Thank you for kicking us off with such a strong first question. And again, as takeaways kind of populate for you, feel free to drop them into the chat. So the next question that I have for the panel, prevention isn't just about avoiding removal. It's about long-term wellness. How are you sustaining prevention work beyond the crisis point, and what does success look like?
Thank you, Jessica. I'll start. So I'm Sarah Sims. I'm from Wayfinder Family Services, and we have a really robust kinship navigation services program in Sacramento County, which includes kinship support services for families, relatives, or family friends that are caring for a relative's child, so those in kinship care, as well as family finding and engagement services. And a lot of what we do prepares families for long-term success and wellness, not just responding to the crisis, which we all know happens, right? So one of the main things that we do, one of the first things we do is outreach. We do a lot of early outreach, trying to navigate and find families who are about to kind of enter into a kinship arrangement, or families that maybe just took in a relative, in hopes that we can put supports in place immediately, and share with them kind of the wide gamut of services that we offer, so that we can ideally prevent crisis or give parents or caregivers the tools that they need to respond to crisis when it does happen. We also have a really kind of robust assessment and family service plan process. So we do a full assessment with families that need case management services, and that includes asking them around information, including like, how did we get here? You know, what have you experienced? What has the youth in your home experienced? So we can really understand who they are, what they might need. Anticipating their needs oftentimes is one of the most important aspects of our work, so that we can prepare them. We also have a family service plan that uses the Strengthening Families and Protective Factors framework, apologies. And that kind of guides areas that we can look into with the family, not only to see what they might already have in place that we can leverage to help strengthen the family, but also areas maybe that we can help strengthen and provide education and resources in order for that family to do well over time. So that can include things like concrete supports. Does the family have what they need, including even the basics, food, shelter, childcare? Are they financially stable? We really try to emphasize kind of the whole child, whole family approach, where you're really considering not only the wellness of the child, but the wellness of the parents or caregivers, and then also kind of the overall family, right? We know that the well-being of the child is directly intertwined with the well-being of the caregivers. We want to make sure that they have the resources that they need. And we also like to educate families on how they might be able to access resources on their own. So not only do we put systems in place like maybe public benefits or helping them access food banks or providing groceries, going grocery shopping with them, things like that, but we also want them to be able to feel confident accessing those on their own. Other types of protective factors we really heavily emphasize is like parent resilience and being able to ensure that caregivers feel like they can cope with stress and that they have people in their corner. Having social connections. We all know caring for children takes a village, right? And then when you add in that you are caring for children who have experienced trauma, oftentimes you need more folks in your village. And so we have a lot of supports in place, like support groups. We have family events, ways for families who are going through the same thing to connect with one another and build on that natural support system, and also feel validated and hear from other people who have experienced similar circumstances. We also have parent and youth advocates that can bring in kind of that lived experience and be able to share from their perspective what has worked for them and what the family might be able to try long-term just to promote wellness and remain stable. Some of the other protective factors we've looked at includes like parenting information or kind of attachment and social and emotional confidence within the children in their home. So are they getting what they need? Do we need to refer them to therapeutic services or things like that? What does attachment mean, right? What does parenting a child who has experienced trauma look like? What resources are out there to not only give you kind of a trauma-informed lens, but what do you do in the evening when you're on your own and this child's not reacting the same way that your children did when you raised, your daughter or your son, things like that. Just building up and giving them tools that they feel confident in using when no one else is there. We also do, within kind of our assessment process, we do a full ACEs questionnaire with the caregiver on the youth that are in the home. And that's really meant as an education tool. Like we provide information on what ACEs are. So for those, I'm sure everyone's heard of them, but adverse childhood experiences, of kind of how that came about. And then also just emphasizing the importance of taking care of ourselves, especially when you have a high ACE score, and emphasizing the need for the youth in the home to have access to ongoing health care, including physical health, but also mental health in kind of the wide gamut of what health includes. And then we also do a lot of work around preparing families for things that they can expect to happen. So we do a lot of education and preparation around like kinship specific challenges. So some of that includes things like grief and loss. Like there's always grief and loss when it comes to kinship care, around not only maybe what they thought the relationship was going to be like with their family, but also potentially around some of the trauma they've experienced and things like that. There's a lot of ambivalent challenges in kinship care, including like maybe a grandparent was prepared and ready for retirement and they did not anticipate taking their grandchildren in their home. And as much as they love them and they want to provide a healthy, safe home for them, their life now looks different than it did in their minds of what their current circumstances would look like, right? So being able to call those things out for kinship caregivers and prepare them of like, here's what you might experience and here's how you might navigate it. And then should they go through it, being able to partner with them to help them navigate that can make a world of difference in terms of just their feelings of ability to cope and being able to care for that child adequately. And with that, we also do, like I said earlier, we do family finding engagement services. So part of kinship care can also be like if we got a referral for a youth that needs family finding services, during that process, we're finding a number of different relatives that can be lifelong connections for the youth. And so part of our service can also be how do we utilize those folks that we found to build kind of a support network for the whole family, and then also ensure that the youth has people they can call when something goes wrong, or people that are there not only while they're in care, but when they're turn 18 or when they're 25 and that kind of thing. So it's built ideally for long-term sustainability to make sure that everyone feels supported in the way that they need it. And I would say for me, success looks like not only being able to maintain a child in their family of origin, but also having caregivers who can express that they feel confident, like they feel good about where they are, that they have the tools they need, or they know where to look if they need additional services or help. So
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And you've provided, quite a bit of information for people to think about, which is long-term success. A lot of it is preventative, right? You talk a lot about this upstream model and looking down to see how will this family, when I am not there, what resources will they use? What knowledge will they draw upon? And you brought up protective factors, which is a love language of ours over here. And so I'm curious for people on the line, where are you going for your protective factors information? Will you not be a gatekeeper? We need you to tell us in the chat. What? I see Casey from Caltrin telling us that there are free protective factor trainings for staff and yourself on Caltrin. That is correct. Where else are you going, y'all? Where are you going for your protective factors information? And if you are not currently actively pursuing protective factors training, or that's made you curious enough to say, what are they talking about? We would highly recommend that you take a look. Caltrin is one of the resources. The reason why we bring it to you is because it is funded by the state of California, by OCAP, for you to be utilizing. All right. DCFS, great. First 5 might have protective factors information. Great. Thank you all. All right. And I believe we had a Carol. Did you have a thought about this one as well?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Sarah, you covered such a wide range. Just a couple things that I would add is, I think we talked about this at the very beginning, is really focusing on proactive versus reactive solutions. That is what's going to sustain long-term wellness and resilience in terms of prevention. So, and as Sarah talked about, it is, how do we strengthen families? How do we use the protective factors? How do we enhance their natural protective factors and not focus on deficiencies with families? And as the panel talked about earlier too, is families, is listening to families. We may be professionals. Families are experts within their own families. And we have to allow the grace to listen and not judge, and let them lead. Let families tell us what they need. And then we can, build upon that. The other thing too, also for, I think, prevention is self-care. If our families are not able to take care of themselves because they're so stressed and overwhelmed, as we all know, they're not going to be able to care for their youth. So really focusing on, some families feel guilty about self-care. Like we talk to families, well, I shouldn't be taking time for myself because my job is to focus on taking care of these children. So one thing that we talk about, Dr. Diana Ramos, who's our newest Surgeon General, made a speech a couple of weeks ago, and I was there, and she talked about ACEs, but she talked about this analogy. She's like, when you're on the plane and they're talking about the oxygen mask, what do they say? Give yourself oxygen first so that you're there to then provide oxygen to your significant other or your child or your youth. So I think with prevention is allowing opportunities and resources for people to also take care of themselves within their communities. And just wrapping it with just social determinants of health, looking at, the people we work with and ourselves as whole persons, and how are we connecting them and collaborating with our community, like that cross community sector collaboration, family engagement and empowerment, education and training, so that folks have what they need to really feel empowered and navigate their community. And also lastly too is data-driven decision making. And I think we're going to talk about that later, but really looking at data to see what's working, what's not working, and using some lived experience information that I think we're going to talk about later.
Awesome. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, thanks, Carol and Sarah. Some good information. I want to kind of speak from a similar but like slightly different lens. You've heard a lot already about how, to me, I call it resource rich Sacramento is. And when I talk with folks in other counties, you know, they often say, gosh, you know, how do you guys do all that? How do you have these resources? What are the connections? And one thing I wanted to share about, we do have a prevention cabinet in Sacramento County. It's relatively newish. I think it goes back to about 2019. And it's not to say that there have not, as you've heard, been prevention efforts going on for many, many years in Sacramento County. But I think the goal was really to push the envelope in terms of connectedness, particularly around the collaboration, right? We are all doing things. We cannot all be doing them in parallel. We have to have a connectedness about us. And so the prevention cabinet was established to bring both leaders of formal institutions together, community members, people with lived experience. And to me, that it encapsulates some of the things that you're hearing, but at a different level, right? It's not the direct service level, but it's more at that higher macro level of let's also pull together and make sure that we have a vision, right? Of where are we going in the future? How do we want prevention to look so that we are sustaining, right? So that we are about long-term wellness. You know, we are talking about social determinants of health. We are talking about ACEs and trying to make connections to what each agency is doing and how we can support each other. So I've only been part of it for a short time, but the benefits I've seen is that there is a vision. There are relationships amongst people, and there's a continued desire to learn and grow and build additional relationships so that we can have stronger communities. Identify what is working, sort of creating that sort of common language and understanding, creating that awareness so that when opportunities come up that I'll speak to as my example of success is we had an opportunity in child welfare to come up to apply to the state and be part of their Family First Services Prevention Act and to create a comprehensive prevention plan. And it was so much easier because we had this dedicated group of people that was already together, right? They were already aligned in focusing on prevention. And we needed a governance structure. We needed a support setting where we could take information and disseminate. And it was foundational to create our ability then to move forward and then partner with many of you who are on this call, right? And other partners to move strategies forward. So for me, it creates that opportunity to bring things together. And, it's an adage, I didn't create this. I think I heard about this many years ago, but it's like, you go slow at the beginning, right? You build relationships, you create a common vision, that common language. And then when opportunities arise, it is much easier to move forward and take advantage of those opportunities because you're not establishing those relationships each time, right? You have them. And I think you're seeing some of the benefit of that, that was going on much before the prevention cabinet by the partnerships we have here today. And that cabinet only strengthens those and enables the work to move forward smoothly and to sort of grow the effort, if you will, to a community level. So I think that everyone who's spoken today and more that's coming is just evidence of that prevention and the success that's going on in this county.
Karen, you bring up something I think that maybe will be a first time someone has heard it on this line. You talked about prevention councils. Prevention cabinet, it can be called different things. It's actually our next question. And it's under the umbrella of, we often hear nothing about us without us. What advice would you give to others trying to build a prevention cabinet or similar body that truly reflects lived experience? And so I'm grateful that you bring this up. You've already given us some best practices for what that looks like. And I'm curious if, Norin, if you'd like to add to that of what that might look like to ensure that we are building it, but also that it reflects lived experience.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So first and foremost, I would suggest taking a proactive approach, becoming culturally competent about the population that you're providing service for. This helps with the communication. We're all from different backgrounds and cultures, so it definitely helps with the communication gap that exists. Also, it can prevent unconscious biases and premature removals, right? Secondly, I would say research and educate yourselves on the different resources that the communities provide. Yes, our families may be aware of some of the resources there, but might not be aware of all the resources, you know. So for example, parenting classes, community incubators, food and clothing banks as well. And then lastly, I would say you need to treat the families with respect and dignity, you know, have empathy. You know, a lot of our families are maligned and devalued in their daily lives, you know, so having that respect and dignity is paramount.
Absolutely. And you know, you mentioned something about, you know, the benefits of what this prevention cabinet would be, and of course, making sure that folks are aware of the resources that are in the community. I'm just curious, for those of you that are on the line, when you think about the resources in the community that you are providing or referring out to the most, why don't you tell me in the chat, what does that look like for you? What is the number one service? You keep it in the front folder because you know you're going to use it. What is that service for you? Now, I ask that question because often you may not be the one providing it. You might have to refer it out. Do you have information, or how updated is that information? Where am I referring to? What does a warm transfer look like? What does it mean to ensure that a family doesn't leave with just a sheet, right? It's kind of building that bridge. And so many of you on the call, you are the bridge. And so it's great to be thinking about how this information directly applies to our everyday work. So thank you for that, Noreen. I wondered, Carol, did you have a thought to add to that?
No, I think Karen and Noreen did a beautiful job. One of the things, and I'm not an expert at prevention cabinets, but within our agency and some of our programs, we do have advisory councils. And I would offer that really center the lived experience from the start when you're building it. So co-designing this with those with lived experience, whether it's your youth, your parents, your caregivers, and ensuring that the agenda setting is very inclusive. So that it's balanced and inclusive membership between, like Karen said, right? Research advocates, government systems, community grassroots organizations, lived experience leaders. And I think building it requires some real like intention and structure so that it's clear, like defining your mission and scope. What are your key areas? I think Nora, you mentioned it too. What are the key areas that we really want to focus? What are the outcomes that we want to have? And then we all talked about building a culture of trust, so that there's storytelling and it's really safe. People can authentically share what their thoughts are and feel that they're valued. And ensuring that there's also equity in the power and accountability between all members.
And you know, there's also a comment in the chat I'd like to highlight from Nikisha. Paid community advisors, people from the community to regularly offer input on the processes and procedures and outcomes and goals. And so I can see some people also agreeing with that. I just have a question, maybe for asking for a friend, okay? Maybe there's somebody on the line and they are hearing this and they think to themselves, I want a prevention cabinet. I want to participate in a prevention cabinet. Where would they even go? Where would they even start? And you know, when I ask myself that question, I'll be honest, I'm going to go off script. It feels very strategies TA to me. Michael, would this be a strategies TA type of conversation? Just curious. For folks looking to kick one off, figure out more resources about it, things of that nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think because we have the benefit of collaborating with our Sacramento partners, you know, we have some firsthand experience, but we've been working with prevention cabinets, prevention collaborations, prevention working groups around the state. I know you don't even know all of them, but we can help people dig into it.
Wonderful. So if somebody was curious, even of starting that conversation or learning more about it, would you recommend they go to the website? Which website would we direct them to?
I would say to contact us. That's a good question, and because it's also fluid. one of the big things one of our big events I didn't describe is the annual prevention convening that we co-lead. And through that process, we call them county prevention teams, and the Sacramento Prevention Cabinet is one of those. And so we do as needed follow-up. So the teams get together and we have an option for people to say, I don't know who my county prevention team is. Can you connect me? So we do have some contacts to connect people, but there's no
All right. Well,
one
here's the good
web
news.
page that does that.
We have a link in the chat, and don't forget, on the last page of that action sheet we've provided you, there is information about Strategies TA as well, so you can click in and look into that. So thank you so much. Sorry, Michael, to pull you up so fast. All right. I have another question just to kind of follow this line of thought. And the question is, how do you navigate the tension between traditional child welfare systems and community-based approaches that focus on dignity and healing? Norrin, I saw you unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'll go. Just from a historical perspective, there's always been mistrust between African Americans and U.S. governmental agencies, right? Always been a contentious relationship. After the Civil War ended, you have black codes, and you fast forward to the Reconstruction era, and then Jim Crow laws are, put into place. So there's always been law to subjugate African Americans, right? And over the years, these sentiments are promulgated through the media, and it permeates into the minds of individuals. And I want to speak specifically, since the subject matter is child welfare system, about social workers, right? So what happens is social workers, they end up applying unconscious biases, also known as implicit biases, and they have preconceived notions and stereotypes about the persons that's being served, right? So that's just from a historical perspective, the issues that we have. Then it becomes twofold, right? So then you have families that are served, and they're unable to successfully navigate through the child welfare system by themselves, right? And that could be predicated on the lack of exposure to a certain class of people. So what I mean by that, for example, if you have a CFT meeting, which is a child, family, and teen meeting, sometimes the parents may become overzealous or a little bit animated, and the social worker from a different background culture may deem that this behavior is unacceptable, and they're penalized from their behaviors, right? So to restore dignity and start the healing process, like I mentioned previously, you need to address the families with respect, right? That's using sir or ma'am, Mr. or Mrs., which indicates respect, right? And you have to listen. You need to be an emphatic listener. You don't be judgmental. Like I mentioned before, a lot of these individuals lack a voice in their everyday lives. So listening is very important. You want to be flexible, provide a solution. So here at Better Life, we take a hands-on approach. So for example, we may get a referral from a particular family who's having some issues going through the RFA process with the county, and they're referred to us, and we're able to meet them where they're at. So maybe they're having issues accessing the internet at home. Well, we'll say, well, you can come to the office and we'll help you with you can use our computers to access the internet. Or they may be thinking the paperwork is too tedious, right? Well, you come to the office, or I can go out to their homes, and I'll write down their responses, things of that nature, right? So, from my point of view, respect is huge. It's very big. It's very paramount in regards to the relationship and them becoming having dignity and health restored once again.
Norrin, you bring up so many important points. I just want to highlight for the crowd, you talked about unconscious bias, implicit bias. And if we think about that from a leadership perspective, it's almost moving upstream. We're asking people to be clear of where am I starting before I kind of jump into the river to help others. And I really appreciate that. For those of you that are looking for resources, trainings on these topics, I would challenge you to put them in the chat. Where are you going for this information? Because you don't know what you don't know. So if you're just sitting, kind of winging it, trying to figure it out on your own, there may be resources already available to you. I would recommend you drop them in the chat if anything comes to mind that would maybe help expand this area of knowledge for yourself. Kim, did you have a thought? I saw you unmute yourself for a moment.
I did, thank you. And Norrin, what you stated was said so beautifully. And it really starts with, a lot of folks have talked about building the trust and the relationships with the community, but equally important is building the trust and the relationship with the folks who are the providers doing the work. And that is really something that within Sacramento County that we really look to. Like child welfare services, we don't have all the answers, right? And for a long time, that was kind of the perception that we were seen as. Like, you guys think you have all the answers, but really recognizing that we trust there are providers to engage with families in a manner that is going to meet them where they are at. And just to kind of further illustrate that, LaDonna, she talked so much about her role as a cultural broker. And we always want to see outcomes that are positive for our families. And there are times when things don't go in the direction that we would like them to go. And there was a situation that LaDonna was the cultural broker on, and the mother was not going to be able to reunify. And her child was moving forth, unfortunately for her, but recognizing that it was best interest, child was moving forth to adoption. LaDonna taking that time to really unpack that with that mother and treating that mother with dignity and giving resources to her, not just handing them over, but really navigating that mom for therapeutic services that were culturally appropriate to continue that healing, because despite what that outcome was, that's still mama. That's still mama, and that's a loss, and she's grieving. And so, we trust our partners that that work is happening with families, because as a child welfare agency, we would not have been able to do that level of work that LaDonna did with that mother, and countless other examples. Just touching briefly on the other partners that are in this space with us, Tangela, affectionately known as Tange, and the work that she does with our families who are unhoused, treating them through the housing navigation model with such dignity, and when they're unhoused, and identifying what are their needs, what do they need, not just to get into a home or a temporary shelter, but what beyond that is needed, right? Work that child welfare trusts our partners to do, and the relationships that we have. Thinking about, Norrin already touched on Better Life. The approach that they take and trying to move families through when there are barriers for a family member to become a resource parent, right? We want kids, and everyone here knows that we like kids to be placed with their family if they have to come into care. Those are the best outcomes for children, keeping those connections. And sometimes there's barriers that get in that way. Norrin and Better Life and the creativity that they use, not going outside the lines or, usurping or going, not following any mandates, breaking any mandates, but just really getting creative and supporting that creativeness and trusting that that creativeness is going to move us to such a better outcome. And then finally, with our Kinship Navigator program and Wayfinder, and just what was already shared in regards to, when families need support and they need help, say with a utility bill, or they need support with food, groceries, the ability for them to engage with families in a way that is just respectful, bringing forth respect, and not looking at the situation as one that is reflective of anybody being in a place of neglecting the children that they're caring for, but rather being bold enough and courageous enough to reach out for help and to be able to provide that help in a way that is, again, with dignity, really speaks to, how our partners are working within the community. And then in turn, that trust that we have as an agency, as a child welfare agency, to know that this is how our families are getting their services, when they're services that we are just not aligned to be able to provide.
Absolutely. And I believe, Carol, you had maybe a final thought to this before we summarize.
Sure. I think one of the tensions also, and it's not really, just child welfare, some of the regulations that we have to adhere to need to be changed. So I think we're all working towards, when it comes especially to relative caregivers and some of, all the hoops that folks have to jump over, and that sometimes regulations don't really support natural support systems that we're supposed to be building in for families. One of the things that we're seeing right now, and of course we're building trust with our Latino community because of current situations, we have a lot of our families who are very fearful. They're very fearful to receive support. They're very fearful for us to receive demographic information. So we're certainly meeting our families, where they're at, and trying to provide support and trying to reduce any myths or fears that folks may have. And even some creative responses, just, we talked about RFA. We had a lot of families who didn't want to go to the police station or DOJ or the county to get fingerprinted for RFA. So now we have mobile live scan units that we have our family partners go to the home and actually live scan families. So just trying to find ways to reduce the barriers, provide support, to connect at a deeper level, to reduce any types of barriers for families. So
absolutely. And I feel like throughout the course of your three responses, it seems to be a common denominator that kind of this navigation of the traditional system and maybe the community approach still has a foundation as a human who is serving other humans, as you are, of respect, authenticity, and trust. And so I appreciate that theme has continued on through this question as well. Wonderful. Now, I do have just two more questions. I'd love to get through them both. The first question is, and by the way, if you're a participant on this call, I'd ask you to answer this question too. What myths or what myths about families or communities did you personally have to unlearn to do this work with authenticity and heart? It actually reminds me of a quote that said, as people evolve, they consider who they want to become, but it also requires a level of unbecoming as well. And so I think about this question, and I ask, if you're listening as a participant, maybe you answer in the chat as well. But the question is, what did you personally have to unlearn to do this work with authenticity and heart? LaDonna, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah. This one takes a little bit of courage because no one wants to admit ignorance or holding a bias, but two myths that I had to personally unlearn to do this work. One related to families is that every family was going to show up in this circumstance ready to fight for their family. The other myth was that CPS is always showing up to take children away. So where I thought that if CPS is called and a social worker is at the door, they are investigating to remove kids. So I assumed that my role was going to be, the driver and the passenger. This is my role to protect the parent. But I learned quickly that I'm not limited to just protect. I'm not even starting out as protect. I am the driver, hands attended to the passenger, and I buckle up for the ride. So just being able to recognize that one, CPS does not immediately show up as the big bad wolf, and two, like Khalil Gibran says, sometimes there are no victims. And it goes back to the very first question, shared accountability. So, and I've taken that to heart. And now I can tell parents, I'm not here as your personal Al Sharpton. I'm not your defense attorney. We all have to show up and be accountable and be honest and have the courage to change where we need to change so that you can be safe, stable, and strong.
I want to start by saying how much I appreciate your honesty. And I wonder, and I bet in the chat people will agree, if you can relate, if that is something that you also had to personally unlearn, you can say me too in the chat. Because I think what we learn when we hear people share vulnerably and honestly, which we're so grateful for, is we see ourselves in it. And we go, oh, I thought it was just me. Oh, it is other people. And then we find that this idea of a village as a service provider, we have a lot in common in the experience that we have and a lot of the barriers and challenges that we overcome as well. And I see people agreeing with you, raising their hands as well. Thank you, LaDonna. I believe, Kim, did you want to add to this as well?
Yeah, thank you. And just briefly, you know, I had to unlearn that not everybody shows up with good intent. And there is, you know, always a lot of dialogue around, you know, and there's some truth to that, that you make an assumption that folks are showing up with good intent. And that's what we all hope, and that's what we want to believe. Unfortunately, in situations that we find ourselves in working with just the diversity of our families and situations that they are in, sometimes people show up without that good intent. And sometimes, you know, we talk about implicit bias. Sometimes people show up with a very specific agenda that they hope to follow through on. And so it's really being able to, that's how we get systems that don't work for the people, but work against people. And so it's those times where you have to discern between who is coming into the space with good intent versus those who are not, and being courageous enough to call that out when it needs to be called out.
I appreciate that, Kim. And something that I'd like to add to it is a myth I've often heard just in the work that we do. We speak to a lot of folks just like everyone on this call in our trainings. And something I hear people say as a myth is that they thought they had to have all the right answers all the time. They had to, and that is very isolating if you believe that, because it also means that it's up to you and no one else. And I think if we look kind of to our left and right, even in this space, you see that that's not how it actually works. That you do need a village of people around you, whether that's the person that you pick up and you call before you have to have that tough conversation you've been dreading all week, whether you pick up the phone and call after you've had a situation that did not go as planned. Who is in your village? And so I ask you to think about that. Is there someone I have who understands the nature of my work, who can relate, who I can pick up and reach out to? That is one myth I hear so often that I wanted to address that. And I appreciate the myths that Kim and LaDonna have raised as well. Thank you so much for that. And for many of you on the call, probably myths for yourself. As a matter of fact, this question might go on your takeaway sheet as far as what myths do I currently have that I might need to unlearn to do this work more authentically and with heart. And with that, I'd like to present our last question. And we have about 6 or so-ish minutes before we wrap up here. So I'll ask a few to briefly share. In your experience, how has data helped data come alive? In your experience, what has helped data come alive? Not just as numbers, but as a story that honors lived experiences and drives meaningful change. So now we're going to talk about what the data tells us. Sarah, did you want to kick us off?
Yes, thank you, Jessica. So for me, I feel like one of the biggest things when I'm talking with my team about data that I like to kind of dig my fingers into and unpack is really like what trends we're seeing, or what patterns we're seeing amongst families. Like, what are families consistently saying, maybe in the last quarter, or the last month, of what they need or what would have been helpful. Maybe we see in a particular quarter that a specific service is being requested consistently by a large number of families. And does that then speak to a service gap or something that we can then create to fill that service gap, right? And then I also like to create experiences that promote like authentic sharing and a safe spaces that isn't just like our EHR that spits out, how many folks we served, but provides families an opportunity to share kind of their real life experience and the good and the challenging, and provides opportunity for what did you not get that you wish you would have had, or what has been the most monumental support that you've gotten thus far that made the difference, or even like with our support groups, being able to kind of document themes that we're seeing, if caregivers are sharing consistently that there's certain needs that they have that aren't being met, can we then utilize that, not sharing what they said specifically to protect confidentiality, but pulling those themes out of like, maybe, caregivers are consistently struggling with educational supports, or maybe they're consistently struggling with online safety with their teens, or maybe they're struggling with communication with other professionals or things like that. And then can we create services that kind of meet that need on a larger scale? So that's kind of what we do for data.
That's great. And I appreciate the scaling model, right? And kind of building upon and just scaffolding, as they say. Wonderful. Thank you. Tangela, did you have a thought?
Sorry. I was just going to add, that we use a lot of stories as well. So we actually use stories to help show the impact. And we've also done videos of our families sharing their story to bring the work to life, to bring the data to life. And I think that's probably one of the most, I would say, Sarah, probably one of the most meaningful impacts is hearing the stories and how it's changed their lives.
And Carol, I'll say that Patty in the chat agrees with that, because Patty says adding testimonials to data report. And so I think that is another way of storytelling with the numbers. I think that's great. Thank you. Tangela, did you have a thought as well?
I agree with both of the ladies. That's one thing about, if you give me numbers, you can show me numbers all day long. But when we are here and watch these families move into these homes, who's been homeless for a large amount of times, and even short amount of time is traumatizing, no matter which one it is. But so see the kids excited and happy about them finally having a room or a bed, or things that we take for granted every day, for them to receive it, and how grateful they are, and to see that that takes a that adds to a number. So you look at them as one family, but that's the gift to them is more than a number. So to provide those stories along with those numbers, it just to shine a better light on it.
Angela, you remind us with that comment that the nature of the work is not transactional, it's relational. And sometimes relational is hard to take from percentages and numbers on a piece of paper. And so how do you infuse, we've been talking about authenticity and heart. It sounds like that storytelling is kind of part of including that in a data discussion. I really appreciate that. I myself see numbers and they don't tell me the story that it tells to some. So sometimes you have to lay it out for me and a testimonial will do it. So I appreciate that. Great. Marilyn, did you have a thought that you wanted to add to that as well? I wanted to give you the opportunity. I wasn't sure. All right. While you're thinking about it, Karen, I think that you had mentioned data actually earlier. Did you want to expand on that thought?
Sure. Although, Marilyn, did you find your mute
great.
button?
Yeah. Hi, I'm sorry.
First.
as it relates to lived experience, it's so important for our clients to speak their truth. We can only tell their stories, and the data only projects or infer based on what you're able to filter. But we want our clients to really define the key issues by telling their stories, and also to co-create solutions based on their experiences, because that is really a powerful way of healing in community if the community participates, right, in creating solutions. Is so, and I wanted to talk a little bit earlier about the trust and the myths. I mean, the community in its totality really has a capability of healing itself. I think that's one thing that we need to unlearn as we move forward and participate in a more equitable and meaningful way of creating change.
Yeah.
Because so often we see people coming in and providing some top-down solution. It never works. It's always bottom up. It has to be, because the people in those communities who are living that truth need to be to identify with those changes and feel like they have some stake in making those change. So hearing that directly from those clients make all the difference in the world. And you can understand their passion and understand their needs in ways that you cannot get from data. We just went through an experience using concept mapping. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's another
Tell us more.
tool. It's called concept mapping. It's another tool that allows the community to participate in creating and examining the way they interact or their solution to a problem. And it was very effective for us in actually doing some academic research on our healing circles. So I would encourage you, if you're looking at having a participatory way of doing some analysis, academic analysis, is using the idea of concept mapping as well.
I love that. For some of you, you're going to write that down in a takeaway or a next action. It's Google concept mapping. Thank you, Google. We do have just a few short minutes, and I want to, oh, see, we're teaching, you taught me something today. I appreciate that. I see it in the chat. They're like, concept mapping? Never heard of this. And so I think this opportunity for us to be together and really talk and discuss and share resources, experiences, is such a beautiful kickoff to the idea that it takes a village. It takes a village not just to rally with a family, but it takes a village for us to rally with each other. And a couple things I want to do in our remaining time together, of course, is thank our panelists. I want to say thank you, each one of you, for your time, for your sharing. And for those of you that are with us, we can thank them in the chat. You know how we can say thank you. We can give them an emoji. That's how I like to thank people. It's a way to say thank you for your time. And if there was something in particular that is your greatest takeaway, someone said something and you're just gonna be thinking about it for the rest of the day, share it in the chat. That's always a great way for us to solidify our takeaways and to share them with each other. The other thing I want to say outside of thanking our panelists is just to give you an expectation of what happens now, what happens next. I want to remind you that this is only the beginning. This is the very first step in the webinar series. And so as we move through the different topics, we invite you to do a couple of things. Number one, we invite you to take the feedback survey that has just been dropped into the chat for you. That feedback survey will give you an opportunity to share how did this webinar go? We use that feedback, of course, to always implement best practices into future webinars. That QR code will take you to a page where you can sign up for more of the series webinars within this month. And you can also do that on your action sheet. So every single action sheet title has a register button. And you can always click on page 3 of your action sheet on any of those logos, and you'll learn more about some of the organizations that you heard about today. And with that, we want to say thank you so much. We see your comments in the chat, all of the thank yous. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time and the hard, important work that you do. And with that, we want to, I believe we're landing right on time. All right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your day. We hope to see you next week. We're going to be talking about prevention in a tribal context. So don't forget to sign up for that. And we will see you in a week. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, participants.